Hey everybody. Well, I've been getting a ton of questions online and comments about what kind of things do I cook at home. So I guess I'll bring you into the kitchen with me, and we're going to show you a couple of the things that I make at home. I'm going to start with my homemade chicken and dumpling recipe. I've been shocked at the amount of comments that have asked questions about that. Since I cook so much at the campsite, what do I actually make at home? Well, here we go. So for my homemade chicken and dumplings, I start off by putting a quart of chicken broth, usually unsalted chicken broth, and about a quart of water together. So I have about a half a gallon of liquid. And I'm just going to add a 3-pound frozen block of chicken thighs to it and bring it to a boil. Now you may notice, of course, that I did use, boned chicken, because I'm going to extract, broth from those bones. I cook my chicken and dumplings a certain way so that everything mixes just exactly right. And now I'm going to boil that chicken, but I'm going to go ahead and add in about 2 cups of chopped up carrots. And because I want them to mature all the way to small, I've chopped up a thing of mushrooms to put in there too. But by the time they get done, they're going to be real small. I am emphatic about glass tops. I have to be able to see my food cooking. But basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring this to a rolling boil. I want those carrots to have a good head start so that when I do start to really mix things up a little later and make my dumplings and things, that the carrots will be nice and soft. And then before everything gets boiling too fast, I do go ahead and add 4 bay leaves or sections of, and just toss them in there on the top. And I did add just a little bit of poultry seasoning. Now I'm going to bring this to a gentle rolling boil and turn it down as low as I can to maintain that heat, and let this probably cook for about 45 minutes to 50 minutes. Make sure that the chicken is cooked through, and then I'm going to kind of speed it up and extract all the rest of the liquid from out of the chicken bones, get as much of that broth out of there as I can. And at that point I'll add just a little bit of butter to give the base a little bit of a buttery appeal, and some real garlic. And then of course later I'll add red bell peppers, onions, and chopped up celery. Okay, I'm going to do a little check here. I've been going about 20-25 minutes. That's the gentle boil I was referring to. Things seem to be going pretty good. I can see the broth being, the broth being extracted from the chicken, because you can look at the little grease bubbles that are floating around in there. I'm going to go ahead and add about 1/3 of a stick of butter in there, because I want it to start getting busy being a part of everything. And I'm also going to add my celery. I cut my celery from the inner stalks, not the outer really green part, but these are the parts that add a little bit more flavor, because I want the celery to almost liquefy. You'll barely be able to make out a piece of celery by the time this is done. And the same will be so for my onions and bell peppers. So now I'm going to bring it back to a boil and probably go another 30 minutes or so before I pull my chicken out to cut the meat off the bone. Alright, we're just checking things, and if you notice, the liquid is starting to take on the color of the red bell peppers, onions, and all the ingredients. It's taking up a nice, beautiful yellowish orange stain, and that's all those flavors cooking into the broth. So things appear to be going pretty good. Vegetables are getting soft, carrots are getting soft, but I'm going to go another 15 minutes here before I pick my chicken meat off of the bone. Okay, I went about another 20 or 30 minutes, and I know my chicken is ready to get the meat off of. This is the part where I start to get excited about making my dumplings. So I'm going to pull my chicken thighs out of here. But what that's also going to let me do is have an opportunity to have nothing but the vegetables in my chicken pot. And so a very important part of the prep for my liquid is going to take place after I get all my thighs out. And what I do is I use one of these mashers like this, and I go around and just kind of press down on all the vegetables. And what that's going to do is just sort of break them down and make them easier to become a part of the liquid and get the last bit of those flavors out of the peppers and celery and onions. So I've extracted my chicken from the bones, and it's cooked just about perfect. Now, oddly enough, I'm not going to add my chicken back to the broth again. I'm going to actually just set it there and cover it and sort of just let it cool down a little bit, because I like the integrity of the chicken right now. It's not shredding, and I want my chicken to be nice and chunky in my finished product. So now, while my broth is still gently boiling, I just keep massaging these vegetables down with my masher, essentially just making them a part of the liquid. By the time I'm done, see, I want this to be almost liquefied. Every few minutes I take and continue to give these vegetables a little mashing in here, but I'm going to leave the chicken out until after I've already made my dumplings. And now I have added 1 more quart of unsalted organic chicken broth. I'm going to return this to a boil and then start doing my dumplings. And then I'm going to add about 1 more quarter of a stick of butter. I've got my whipping cream out, which I'm going to wait until the last minute before I add my whipping cream. Now what I'm going to do tonight, because everybody's screaming how hungry they are, is I'm going to go ahead and start making my dumplings, but I'm going to use biscuits tonight. This is the quick way. Usually I make my dumplings from scratch, but like I said, everybody's screaming for how hungry they are, and it's already 5 o'clock, so I'm going to do it the fast way tonight and kind of cheat. But I just take a pack of these really big, like Grands or something like that, biscuits, and I just flatten them all out like that right there. And I use a little all-purpose flour. Now once I've got all 8 of the biscuits about the size of a small pancake, by just working them out in this flour, which keeps them from sticking to my cutting board here. One complaint I've always heard people say is they don't want to use biscuits because the very middle of the dumplings don't get done completely. But I've figured out a little way to avoid that. And what I do is I set my oven on about 350 degrees. And for about 5 minutes, I'm going to put these on a thin cookie sheet and throw them in the oven to help the middles get just a little bit better cooked before I cut my dumplings up. Basically just about like that. And I'm going to slide them in the oven for just a couple of minutes. Okay, so my little pancakes have been in the oven for just a couple minutes. And see how they're a little puffier now? And that should help the insides of them get done a little better when I drop them into my liquid. So they have a little bit more structural integrity, and will end up making a better quality dumpling, so that the breading is a little bit more mature than had I have just put them in there as wet batter dough. And then another little trick is, because they're hot, I'm going to actually leave them sitting here and let them cool back down again. And that way when I go to cut them, they'll be a lot easier to cut and make them nice and even. Okay, I'm going to show you what I mean here. See how how the breading has already started to develop in the middle of these strips. So what I do is I'll cut a strip like this and maybe cut it in half. And it's got that little bit of puffiness in the middle. That's to ensure that my dumplings get done all the way through and have a nice breading texture that soaks up my liquid in the broth. Okay, another little thing I do, now that I've got all my dumplings chopped up, I try to get them all pretty consistent in size, but I like for them to be different shapes. Now, the thing is, when I heated them in the oven, some of them develop to a little bit more consistency than others. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a little bit of this all-purpose flour and just put it right here. And so any of them that are still wet will sort of get that flour attached to them. Ooh, one just hit the floor. I hate that. And it also gives me an opportunity to separate them. They stay a little better separated that way, because as I put them in, I got to put them in as fast as I can so they all stay pretty uniform and I don't have any that are undercooked. And that's really important, that they don't stick together. So that's what this extra flour kind of helps me do. Okay, my base. This took about 90 minutes, but my base has reached a perfect point where everything is broken down into very small pieces. As you can see, that beautiful orangish color of the broth itself now, because of the color of the red bell pepper and onion and carrots are sort of a part of the liquid now. That's what I like to see right there. This is going very well. And then of course you might notice that over here on this eye, I'm mixing a little butter with some all-purpose flour. And that of course is going to make like a little thick roux that I'm going to add back to this. And that's going to thicken everything up when I add my heavy whipping cream. So the first part of the last part of the process is to start adding my noodles in here, or my dumplings. And what I do is I just kind of pull them apart as I drop them all in. Most of the time the liquid will help them separate, but even if they stick together, that's okay. But I want to cook them in this part of the broth so that the flavor that first goes into the breading part is from the actual base of the broth. Now what I can do here is dip them all down in the liquid good, like this. And then I'm going to put the top back on and bring them back to a little bit of a very slow simmering boil and create sort of an oven inside of there so they can expand and become the dumplings. Now here you can see my dumplings are beginning to swell, and I probably took the lid off a little too fast, but I'm going to put it back on and create that oven effect in there until they're just about at their size. And then I'm going to add everything else, including this little roux that I made over there, or gravy thickener, or whatever you want to call it. And that's going to thicken everything up also. Also, another thing to note is that my chicken, by sitting here and cooling down, has now gotten that more solid effect where it's not so apt to rip and become shredded, because I don't want that to happen to my chicken as I'm stirring the final product. Okay, our dumplings have been going about another 15 minutes, and they're starting to swell up and look good, but I want to separate them a little again so that the pieces that are sticking together have an opportunity to be exposed and puff up a little bit. Those are looking really good, nice and shiny. Give my broth a little stir. The color of the broth looks really good at this point. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to add just a little bit of cream to my little butter and flour roux over here. And I'm going to go ahead and dump that on in here. And that's just going to basically act as a thickening agent for everything. It's going to dull the color just a little bit, but that's okay. But you notice all the dumplings are falling away from each other. They're not sticking together. That's a very good sign that they're going to come out really good. And then I'll probably just do this for about another 5 minutes, and I'm going to add some more cream. And now I'm going to add 1 can of low sodium cream of chicken soup, unsalted. And now in goes my chicken that's been sitting here waiting. And then I'm going to add just a little bit more heavy whipping cream to add to the creamy texture of it. And now I'm just going to let it slowly heat for about 15 more minutes. I'm just totally pleased with the way this went so far. If you look, you can see the little pieces of orange and red. That's what I meant by disintegrate. All the carrots, you can't even find a piece of carrot that's any bigger than about that. So it's all became a part of the actual roux itself and the base of the liquid. Okay, we've been a few more minutes of a very, very slow, what I call blurp blurp simmer. The one thing you have to be careful of making chicken and dumplings is to never scorch any of your ingredients with too high of heat. Now this is very thick and very creamy. I'm actually delighted with this, the way this has came out. But that is the finished product right there, and that's what it would look like. And I'm totally happy with it. There we go, chicken and dumplings, Old Bier Dude style.